When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be doing my top 5 underrated characters within A Song of Ice and Fire, and also the history. It's not just the main books, but all of the lore as well. And I would love to hear your guys' before we get into my top 5, because everybody's going to be different, right? And some characters you might think, oh, maybe they're not that underrated as I think they are. So give me your list. And again, there's no real right list, because I might be forgetting people, hence underrated list. But I have my top 5. Not going to do honorable mentions because there's just too many. There's too many characters that I kind of debated with putting on this list, but I settled with a list I was happy about. You know, a mix of A Song of Ice and Fire, mix of some lore characters. I tried to keep it where there was some where it was like not as well known, some that are, I guess, a little bit more known, but they're not as loved by the fandom. So this is my top 5. But before we get into it, if you did want to become a Patreon or a member, you do get videos early, and you do get an extra video each week. So consider that if you would like. And let's get into the video. So my number 5. Now I can already see the comments going off on this one, but my number 5 is Stevron Frey. A lot of you guys probably don't even know who I'm talking about, to be honest. But Stevron Frey is a character that I came to enjoy in my Game of Thrones reread. He comes off as probably the most sensible Frey, in my opinion, and he is the heir to the twins at the start of the main story. He is the person that treats with Robb before eventually Catelyn goes to see Walder Frey. He is the one that leads the Frey armies that goes with Robb, and he is the one that also, during the King of the North speech, is the one that I think had probably the best plan to kind of just stick out of the war and let Tywin deal with the Baratheons, and also try and make some sort of trade deal to maybe get Jaime back to Lannister, but more importantly, get back, maybe gold and hostages. So Stevron Frey to me is someone that also, if you look at it just from he's very sensible in my opinion. He's actually pretty a smart character, but he's also not somebody that is like known as a Frey. Like the Freys kind of have a bad reputation. Stevron Frey just doesn't have that reputation at all. Even if you look at the way he goes out in the Clash of Kings, which very suspicious death. All I'm going to say here, but he is the one that actually leads the Frey forces in the Western campaign. And Robb even thinks about, the wound that he ends up taking that apparently kills him. We'll talk about that in a second. But his death is described as being very brave, and he is someone that Robb even thinks he could have treated with, given that when he breaks the Frey alliance and the marriage pact, he believes he could have dealt with Stevron Frey and they would have come to some sort of agreement. That tells you kind of the sensible person Stevron Frey was, and I really enjoy him. I think he's probably my favorite Frey. I don't know if anybody even has a favorite Frey. Let me know what your favorite Frey is down in the comments, but I thought Stevron Frey, highly underrated in the community, and I thought deserved to be on this list. So, number 4, I have Yorn. This might be a character that's recency bias, because I just got done recording Arya's A Clash of Kings, our first chapter in Clash of Kings, and Yorn is just such a fantastic character, in my opinion. He's somebody that's low-born, but he's with the Night's Watch. He's a fascinating character because he is willing to go out of his way to help Arya, to help Gendry, to not give them up, even though that seems like a sensible decision to, survive, even though it brings more risk to himself by taking them along with him. He is somebody that is very selfless in a lot of points. He has a pretty awesome way of going out, even though he goes out way too early in the series. I just love Yorn. I think he's an underrated character. I never hear about people talking about him that much in the community, and so I thought he deserved to be in here. I don't know if, again, Yorn's the one out of a lot of these characters that I feel like I don't know how much the community loves this character. I think he's personally very underrated, hence why he's on my list. And that's why I think this list can vary from person to person, because it depends how much you think a character is underappreciated. Number 3, I have Aeron Damphair, and this one definitely, to me, deserves to be on this list. He is a character that I remember reading Feast for Crows, wasn't a big fan of his POV, and as I've, gone through Feast for Crows more, I really love this POV. All the Greyjoys are kind of not the brightest, but I love the backstory of the character of Aeron, that he wasn't this religious type figure. until, something happened in his youth and that kind of changed him as an individual, and how he's trying to play the politics of not having Euron be on the Sea Stone chair. I think a very fascinating character that gets very overlooked because a lot of people just don't appreciate Feast for Crows that much. So it's one of those weird things where I think Aeron is one of the most underappreciated POVs in A Song of Ice and Fire, while also being in the most underappreciated book, A Feast for Crows, in my opinion. Like, Aeron has the best chapter of A Feast for Crows, and he's just underappreciated at almost at every sense. Even his first chapter is really great as well. We also have the Forsaken chapter, and we'll see if that George changes that at all when we get into Winds of Winter. But that chapter is insane as well. I think Aeron deserves to be on this list. It's weird putting a POV on the underrated list, but I do think even myself, I underappreciated this character quite a lot. Number 2, I have Alyssa Velaryon, or the Queen to Aenys Targaryen. And again, this character is, in my opinion, one of the most tragic characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, right? She marries into the Targaryen family and, becomes the queen. But Aenys is this king that's very ineffective in his rulership, and the two seemed to be happy. They had a lot of kids together, but Aenys' rule just was never stable. And so she watches as her husband is ineffective in terms of ruling, and that sets up her kids to be in a really precarious position. Aenys then dies, and you have her trying to, back her children and Aegon and Raina. And unfortunately, Maegor claims multiple children of Alyssa's. Two of her sons, her daughter gets married to him because she's forced to do so. Alyssa's life is a very sad one, but she's one of those women that's very strong, right? She holds herself together and she helps her children, take back their father's throne. And I find her to be such a compelling character in the way that she, rules and tries to rule in the years before Jaehaerys and Alysanne take the throne, and how she goes about with this, personal conflict of not wanting to see what happened to Aenys happen to her son Jaehaerys, not wanting her children to marry because of what happened with Aegon and Raina. And you even see the strained relationship she has with Raina, even sometimes with Jaehaerys and Alysanne, as you have this issue with she marries Lord Baratheon and the struggles that come there as well that happen between him and Jaehaerys. I find Alyssa to be such a amazing character, right? Where she's put in so many awful situations that you feel so bad for her. She is, in my opinion, a much more sympathetic and interesting version of the Alicent of the TV show. It's very similar in terms of the way like Alyssa Velaryon is as a character, and I just find her to be a very compelling character. Number one. So number one to me, it's fascinating to me that this character is not talked about more in the fandom. And number one is a character that you guys are going to be very surprised about. But number one is going to be Quentin Martell. Okay, guys, you really thought it was going to be Quentin? As soon as I said Quentin, you guys should have been like, okay, he's lost his mind. It's not Quentin. Number one is actually kind of linked to Alyssa as well, but Raina Targaryen, not the Raina, of House of the Dragon. Aenys' first daughter, Raina Targaryen, or the Queen of the West. I love Raina Targaryen. She is that perfect mix of the fieriness of the Targaryens that you see with like a character like Rhaenyra in Fire and Blood. She's someone that has such an interesting plot because, she's set to be the queen. Then she's set to be the queen with her brother Aegon, and they get married, and that causes a whole issue throughout the entire realm with the faith. They're getting trapped, and Rhaena watches as her husband gets killed by her uncle Maegor. She's then forced to marry the person that killed her husband. She's someone that seems to realize the harshness of the world, that even when she feels kind of cast out as Jaehaerys and Alysanne are ruling, all these people view her as a burden and all of these things that she struggles with. And even, is a character that is very interesting to understand because she seems to be maybe bisexual, maybe she's a lesbian. We don't know what she is in the story. It's kind of left there. I love Raina because she's a character that feels like she has both sides of her father and her uncle, Maegor and of Aenys. She seems to have both of them. She has a soft side at times, but she also has a fiery side, like the Targaryens usually do. And so I love Raina. I think she's the most enjoyable part of Jaehaerys' reign by far. In my, last reread of Fire and Blood, and after you get past kind of the Maegor stuff, it's really where the book, I think, slows down in its pace, and I constantly found myself wanting more of Raina's story. I wish he would have gotten more in depth on that character, and George had given that character more pages in the book, because I think it would have helped with the pacing of Jaehaerys's reign, where there's not really much going on outside of building the infrastructure of Westeros. But that is my top five. So just to repeat it, it's Stevron Frey, Yorn, Aeron Damphair, Alyssa Velaryon, and Raina Targaryen. I feel like all these characters are massively underrated and not really talked about too much. But let me know what you guys have. Do you guys have any other underrated characters? I thought about a couple characters from Dunk and Egg, but they didn't end up making my list. But let me know what you guys think. Also, you're welcome, Dakota. A Frey made the list. You're welcome. Don't say I never did anything for you. I'm just saying.